This is PanzerBlitz Situation 5. This is a demonstration of how a primitive linear Soviet setup is bad. Not necessarily failing, because the imbalance in this scenario is so extreme, but bad enough that a capable German commander has a real chance of winning. This is an actual setup used by a fairly competent player. Make no mistake, PanzerBlitz is for hardcore players. Simple as it is, there's a lot to learn. As it happens, the Soviets won anyway, mainly because the German player was quite incompetent. So, as a reminder, what happens is the Germans start in this area with a mechanized battalion, and they have to push at least a recon company through the Soviet lines to the far side of the board, which does something over here for a time, and then comes back and has to come back through this position and exit off the west edge of the map. And the Soviet setup is over here with a regiment of infantry and some assorted other things. And they have some mobile units, but very few. And I've showed a proper setup, which is based on the principle that the Germans have a mission, and the Soviet objective is to frustrate that mission. But what this Soviet player did is he misinterpreted the instructions and said, well, I'm actually going to set up a line across the map and hold that, but that's not the objective, and it fails, and I'm going to show that here. So let's list the mistakes. Number one, fundamentally not understanding the victory conditions. The Soviet mission is not to hold this line. They would need a full division for that, not a regiment. But the Soviets only need to frustrate the Germans, i.e. prevent them from pushing a recon company through the line quickly. Mistake two. And so we get to misuse of the obstacles. Sure, the middle of the board is sealed off hard, but that weakens the other half of the board. So we have a massive concentration of mines and blocks here and a green hex light there, but very little actually interrupting the German movement through the rest of the board. Mistake three, setting up in the open. This unit is in a gully, and the Soviet thought that was fine, but it's not. It's actually in the open. So he's exposed to anyone on elevated terrain. The Soviet artillery makes it difficult to find a good firing position to shoot that unit, but not impossible. And then there's this guy here, LOL. I'll say more about that later, but he's not actually exposed because there's a map error here. Mistake four is an illegal setup. So this mortar, these two guns, all of these units are set up illegally. You can't be on port 2 to start as the Soviets. That's what the instructions say. We'll allow it, because I don't want to go and redistribute those. We'll allow it. Those are good deployments, but not the best. As will be seen, there are multiple regions where the artillery does not bear. We will use the same attack plans from the proper setup and use those as a baseline. So first of all, we'll start with attack plan north. In German, that's Nordangriff. With a proper defense, this did not exist at all. But this setup creates a new opportunity for the Germans. Basically, you drive a company into Ushas, and then run the payload along the north edge of the map. In the proper setup, there was a block on the swamp road completely denying this area of the map to the German advance. Attack Plan U, which is Ushas, this one no longer exists because there's two blocks here which completely interrupt movement through this area between the swamp and the woods, and the proper attack plan only had a block and a mine, which was theoretically possible to get through, but not practically possible. So attack plan U no longer exists because the placement of blocks means you have to drive over them, and with Soviet artillery registered here, that's just not going to work. And then next we have attack plan 135 North Low, which was to go through this area. The Soviet line is very weak here. You can smash a hole on turn 1 through basically a single unit, or a single unit here, and then there's nothing behind them. So on turn 1, the payload is already racing forward as early as turn 2, because turn 1 you make these guys move, turn 2 they move or you kill them, and then the payload goes on turn 2. The proper defense has several layers of units that must be cleared and obstacles on the critical hexes. This one hex is nice, but there's other hexes that are important. Attack plan 135 in high, and that is going through here, and this is not advisable. For the most part, this has been hard countered. Attack 135S high, which is through here, and that has been hard countered. Attack 135S low, going through this area, is possible, but the crust is quite hard, and the Soviet tanks are nearby. Note that the map representation is wrong. So this map in the Vassal module has woods there and there, but they're actually supposed to be in these two hexes. So that's just a map error. Let's fix it by putting some smoke counters there to represent woods. It usually doesn't matter exactly and may not be noticed, but in this case it does matter. And so I noticed it. And attack plan S, which is to go through here, this one has some potential. Now, despite the fact that this setup uses 2 anti-tank guns and a rifle company more than the proper setup, but no minefield. So there's a anti-tank gun here, wagon, rifle company. The wagon was here, the mortar was here, the anti-tank gun would be extra. There's an anti-tank gun here and a rifle company here, which did not exist at all. So these are extras. That's basically an extra unit. But there was a minefield here, and that block was here. So this has repositioned those units, used more units, but it isn't as good. it seems to be slightly weaker than the proper setup. This is because the two forward units can actually be killed easily, and there's no artillery support. So there was a gun here which could shoot into this area, and there was some guns in reserve which could be deployed into this area. But here all we have is this simply can't see, only sees over here. Same with these, this is too far away. The single mortar here is restricted in its field of fire, running into that. So it only sees a few hexes in this area. Well, it does help over here. But we'll have to look at that. So let's talk about the Soviet artillery, where they're set up. It looks well placed, right? Even though it's illegal. But look at what those guns can actually see. In the very south, there's only a mortar. This guy. And it has many blind hexes. As I said, it runs into that. So there's blind spots there. It has blind spots. All of this is not visible. So in the very south, there's only a mortar, and it has many blind hexes. So most of the south half of the map, because none of these guys can see in there, basically all of this has no artillery support. And the Ushas area that's here has a lot of guns looking in there, apparently. So this area is well covered by artillery. Most of the north half of board 1, that's this part here, is well covered, but there's a lot of cover woods, basically. And there's no Soviet spotters, so it doesn't matter if the guns could shoot there. They can't, because they can't shoot into woods without spotters. But maybe the main problem is that no transport has been allocated to those guns, except for one truck. So if you want to redeploy them, it's going to be basically impossible. Okay, what else are we going to say about artillery? What we're going to say is this, and we're going to say it plainly because this is so important that it should be studied carefully. Don't just drop your big guns on random hilltop hexes and believe that enemy units will stumble into your field of fire. Set up your defense to channel the enemy movement and deploy your fire support to cover the actual choke points. And in a fluid situation, allocate transport to your guns if you can. Now, that's the preliminary discussion of this setup, which is not a good setup. And I'm going to pretty much stop it here, break the video, because the next section is really, really long. So I will actually stop it right here, and then we're going to start looking at the attack plans, which we identified as being potentially useful We're going to look at those in detail. Starting with the new one.